Virgo, they thought they had you figured out, completely mapped, predictable, safe to dismiss or overlook or undervalue because they decided you were exactly what you appeared to be on the surface and nothing more. And that assessment, that fundamental miscalculation of who you actually are, is about to cost them in ways they can't currently imagine, because you're not what they thought, you've never been what they thought, and the reveal of your actual capabilities is going to hit them like watching someone they wrote off as background character suddenly step into main role with skills and resources and power they had absolutely no idea you possessed. The underestimation was total. They didn't just slightly misjudge you, they completely missed the scope of what you're capable of. And their blindness wasn't even malicious necessarily. They just looked at surface presentation and assumed that was all there was, never bothering to investigate deeper, never asking the right questions, never paying close enough attention to notice the clues that you're operating at level they don't have access to. Here's what they missed and what's about to become undeniable. They saw you being quiet and assumed you had nothing to say. Wrong. You were observing, collecting data, listening while everyone else was performing. And you know things now about them, about the situation, about dynamics at play that they think are invisible but aren't invisible to you because you were actually watching while they were too busy talking. The information you've gathered while being underestimated is about to become incredibly valuable. Maybe professionally you understand the system better than people who've been louder about their expertise. Maybe personally you know who's trustworthy and who isn't because you've been paying attention to actions rather than words. And that knowledge is currency. And you're about to spend it in ways that demonstrate you were never the naive or simple person they assumed you were. They saw you being kind and assumed you were weak. Classic error. Kindness and weakness are not the same thing. And you're about to show them that you can be generous and still have boundaries, can be compassionate and still refuse to be taken advantage of, can be gentle in your approach while being absolutely immovable in your standards. The moment you stop accommodating their bad behavior, the moment you enforce a consequence they thought you'd never enforce, they're going to be shocked, genuinely shocked, because they built entire strategy around your predictable niceness. And discovering you have limits, that you will walk away or push back or protect yourself, is going to scramble their entire understanding of how this dynamic works. They saw you struggling and assumed you were failing. Also wrong. Struggle isn't failure, it's often the process right before breakthrough. And while they were judging your temporary difficulty as evidence of permanent limitation, you were building skills and resilience and understanding that only come from working through hard things. You're about to emerge from that struggle visibly successful in ways they won't be able to ignore or explain away. The project you were working on launches and it's excellent. The goal you were pursuing gets achieved. The thing you were building becomes undeniably valuable. And they're going to have to reconcile their assessment of you as someone who was floundering with the evidence in front of them that you were actually in the middle of constructing something they lack the vision to have recognized as significant. They saw your credentials or background and assumed you weren't serious competition. They looked at where you came from, what school you went to or didn't go to, what your resume said or didn't say, and they decided based on those external markers that you weren't a threat weren't someone they needed to take seriously, weren't going to be factor in outcomes they cared about. That dismissal based on surface level attributes is about to age very poorly for them. You're going to outperform them, or you're going to get the opportunity they wanted, or you're going to be recognized by people whose recognition matters. And their reaction is going to reveal more about their character than about your worth. Because secure people celebrate unexpected excellence while threatened people make excuses about why the person they underestimated is succeeding. They saw you being collaborative and assumed you had no individual power. They thought you were a team player because you couldn't carry projects alone, when actually you were choosing collaboration because you understand how to build alliances and leverage collective strength. And the network you've been quietly constructing while they were focused on solo achievement is about to demonstrate its value. When you activate that network, when you call in support from people they didn't know you had relationships with, when you mobilize resources they didn't realize you had access to, they're going to understand that you weren't weak, you were strategic. And strategy beats brute force more often than people who rely on brute force want to admit. They saw you accepting feedback and assumed you were insecure. They watched you actually listen to criticism, watched you adjust based on input, watched you admit when you didn't know something. And they interpreted that openness to learning as lack of confidence, when really it was confidence secure enough to prioritize growth over ego. That willingness to learn has made you better, faster than they improved, more adaptable, more skilled. And while they were staying stagnant in their certainty that they already knew everything they needed to know, you were evolving into a version of yourself that's surpassing them, specifically because you weren't too proud to keep developing. They saw you being patient and assumed you had no ambition. Wrong again. Patience isn't passivity. It's understanding that timing matters. And you've been waiting for the right moment, building capacity in the background, preparing for opportunity that you knew would come eventually, even if you didn't know exactly when. That moment is arriving now. The thing you've been patient about is about to become possible. The door you've been waiting to open is opening. And because you didn't waste energy forcing it prematurely, because you used the waiting period to get ready rather than to get bitter, you're positioned to actually walk through that door when someone who was less patient would still be recovering from exhausting themselves trying to break it down. They saw you focusing on fundamentals and assumed you lacked vision. They were chasing trends, chasing flash, chasing whatever seemed exciting in the moment, while you were mastering basics, building foundation, doing unsexy work that creates sustainable results. Their flashy approach is going to show its limitations. Maybe it doesn't scale. Maybe it only works in specific conditions. Maybe it's built on sand and collapses under pressure. While your approach, the one they dismissed as boring or unambitious, is going to prove durable and adaptable and capable of supporting growth they can't achieve because they never bothered to build proper foundation. Here's what happens when someone realizes they underestimated you. First response is usually denial. They'll try to explain away your success as luck or timing or anything except what it actually is, evidence that you're more capable than they gave you credit for. And watching them perform those mental gymnastics to avoid admitting they misjudged you is going to be interesting, because their denial is really about protecting their self-concept as good judge of talent or potential. Some of them will adjust, will acknowledge they were wrong, will update their understanding of who you are, and treat you accordingly going forward. And those people are showing you their character through their ability to admit error and recalibrate, which is valuable information about who's worth maintaining relationship with. Others will double down, will get hostile or dismissive or find new ways to minimize what you've achieved. And those people are telling you everything you need to know about their insecurity and their inability to handle being wrong. And you can use that information to decide how much energy you want to invest in relationships with people who can't celebrate your growth. The specific way they underestimated you matters less than what you do with the advantage their blindness gave you. While they weren't watching you closely, you learned things, developed skills, built connections, positioned yourself, and you did all of that without interference or competition from them because they didn't think you were worth interfering with. Being underestimated is actually strategic advantage if you use it correctly. You can move without attracting attention, can build without dealing with people trying to block you, can prepare without anyone knowing what you're preparing for. And by the time they notice you're a factor they need to account for, you're already 10 steps ahead of where they think you are. The reveal of your actual capabilities doesn't have to be dramatic. You don't have to make speech or prove anything to them directly. Because the best response to being underestimated is just continuing to be excellent in ways they eventually can't ignore until reality of your competence becomes impossible for them to deny, regardless of their initial assessment. What you need to understand about this moment, you're not responsible for their miscalculation. They underestimated you based on their assumptions, their biases, their failure to look deeper, and correcting their wrong impression isn't your job. Your job is to keep being who you actually are and let their understanding catch up or not catch up, depending on their willingness to see clearly. Being underestimated says more about them than about you. It reveals their tendency to make superficial judgments, their inability to recognize potential that doesn't present in ways they're familiar with, their lack of curiosity about people who don't immediately seem impressive by conventional standards. And all of that is information about their limitations as evaluators of talent and character, not information about your actual worth. The satisfaction of proving them wrong is real but temporary. More lasting satisfaction comes from building life and career and relationships that don't depend on external validation, where you're pursuing excellence because it matters to you, not because you're trying to make point to people who doubted you. Some of them are going to want access to you once they realize what they missed. They're going to want your time, your expertise, your network. And you get to decide whether to be generous with people who dismissed you or whether to maintain boundaries with people who only value you once your value becomes undeniable to everyone. This has never happened in a reading before. That's the framing. Here's why. The convergence of your readiness and their recognition is rare timing. Usually there's gap between when you develop capabilities and when others notice. But right now, those are aligning, meaning you're going to experience rapid shift in how you're perceived and treated by people who previously overlooked you. The specific way you've been underestimated and the specific way you're about to demonstrate your actual level is creating perfect teaching moment. Not just for them learning not to underestimate people, but for you learning that external perception doesn't have to limit what you're capable of achieving, that you can be excellent regardless of whether people are paying attention or giving you credit. Multiple people in multiple domains are going to have their assessments of you corrected simultaneously. This isn't just one person realizing they were wrong about you. This is pattern of underestimation, getting disrupted across your professional and personal life as evidence of your capabilities becomes too consistent to ignore. The shift is going to change opportunities available to you. When you're underestimated, people don't offer you chances, don't include you in conversations, don't consider you for roles. But once perception shifts, doors open that were previously closed, and you're going to have access to spaces and opportunities that weren't available when you were being dismissed. What to do with this information? Don't gloat, don't make them feel small for having underestimated you, because that kind of behavior makes you look insecure even in victory, and secure people don't need to rub other people's faces in being wrong about them. Do set boundaries. Just because they're updating their assessment doesn't mean you owe them access or forgiveness for having dismissed you. And you can be gracious about their recognition while still maintaining standards about who gets your time and energy going forward. Keep building. The best response to being underestimated is making their initial assessment look even more ridiculous by continuing to exceed what they thought you were capable of, not through spite, but through genuine commitment to your own growth and excellence. Use the experience to inform how you assess others. You know what it feels like to be underestimated, so you can choose to be a person who sees potential in people that others overlook, who looks deeper than surface presentation, who gives people room to surprise you. They underestimated you. They were wrong. You're proving it. And that proof is just the beginning of what you're capable of showing them and showing yourself. Keep going. The reveal is just getting started.